Now you've got some people, some insiders saying he was legitimately really scared of them, and even some people saying he feared for his life. Charlie Kirk was caught between a rock and a hard place, and that was his donors and his base. And he had to keep both. The Mossad shot Charlie Kirk in the neck publicly, executing him. I got a tough time believing that, man.
Dave Smith recently smashed the narrative that Israel assassinated Charlie Kirk, and in this clip he talks about that. He talks about the things that he thinks goes against that narrative, despite this being pushed on the internet, and what we can learn from it, and what really was probably the truth about what Charlie was going through, and why he said some of the things he was saying toward the end of his life. So let's take a look. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You know, we're all kind of grateful to say some great thinker who you read, who made you understand the world better. And you were like, oh, thank you. You showed me the truth. Well, as much as that's a good thing, it's the same equal and opposite evil thing to when someone's looking to you for okay, I don't trust the corporate media anymore. I've figured out that they're lying to me. Now I'm listening to this guy on the internet who's breaking down the Epstein case or something like that. And now he's going to come out and just tell me, you're just going to say to people just because what? I mean, anybody who is trying to pin this on the Groypers, and same with anyone pinning this on Israel, it's both just that's just what you want the conclusion to be. It's really that simple. This is what lines up with your pre-existing views, and it would give you a nice feeling of confirmation bias for you to be able to blame this group of people for this. But you simply have no case whatsoever. And they, I don't know. It's just, I do find it kind of wild. Now, to my point about getting into the politics of all of it, and then I promise we will get to what the one listener question part was. That might be edited out of the podcast, but when Rob had some tech problems, I took a couple questions, or I took one question and a couple comments from the live chat, which you can be a part of if you sign up at partoftheproblem.com.
Good advertisement there, but yeah, I'm mostly with Dave. I think that is a problem in this. There is a lot of confirmation bias leading people to think that. I mean, I think that Israel is vile. The U.S. relationship with Israel is vile. And, I think all sorts of other things that my own criminal government does is vile, including partner with Israel to do essentially whatever Israel wants in the foreign policy arena and spill over into domestic policy and hate speech laws and things like that. But not everything is a, Palantir, Operation Mockingbird, theory. Not everything comes down to blaming the things I most hate just because I can't stand those criminal enterprises, and if you don't lay out a convincing case, it's not going to sway people in the direction, even if inconsistencies are in the official story, which they are in this case. So I largely agree with Dave here.
I will get to that. He was asking about the Max Blumenthal piece and his interview with Tim Dillon. But into the politics that I was saying. So what happens is now, and I just find this so disgusting because also, Rob, this was, what did I do that podcast? It was within 48 hours of Charlie Kirk being killed, right? So this is still at the very, very beginning of the thing. And immediately, of course, all of Zionist Hasbara Twitter jumps on the fact that I gave pushback to Ian Carroll, and then, is spinning it in their own goddamn way to go, it's even Dave Smith, when your Jew-hating conspiracy even loses Dave Smith. I mean, that's proof that you're way too off there. And then the mix of people going, well, this is what you created, Dave. Oh, you were with them this whole way. And now and so they're politicizing it.
This is so retarded, and I get this in my comment section too, no matter how many anti-Israel videos I've done, commentaries against it. I'm blamed for covering for Israel and some of it. I just can't help but laugh, but I've experienced that same thing that he is. And what in the world makes you think that because he wants concrete evidence for something, that means he's covering for Israel? I mean, that is the stupid notion that is tarnishing this whole thing in my mind is lashing out at the best critics of Israel and saying they're covering for Israel because they don't just automatically buy into, yeah, Mossad did it because there's inconsistencies in the FBI narrative, and there are. I mean, just defaulting to that and thinking that person's a turncoat, like the best person on this issue from a liberty-based cause, from an America First cause, from a non-interventionist cause, and you're going to just go right out there because you're so convinced and persuaded, despite no leading narrative on your part that you've constructed to connect this shooting to Israel, and you're going to say that they are covering for Israel. I think that's so stupid and wrong-headed.
In the dumbest fucking way possible. Where it's like, one of the guys who just, he's like a reply guy who tweets at me every single day of his life. But he was like, he goes, I got to give Dave a lot of credit for this because this did take courage. And I've come at him pretty hard, but he really what? Like, Rob, what percentage of people who actually listen to the show? Because this is the weird thing in my world, right? Where there's like, what do they call it? Concentric circles. Is that the term I'm looking for? Right. Where the circles get bigger and bigger and bigger. But so there's like the people who listen to this show, right? And then there's like a couple 100,000 people who listen to this show or whatever. And then there's like a much bigger circle of people who like have seen me on other shows and maybe kind of like me or maybe hate my guts, but don't actually listen to the show. You know what I mean? So then there's like the people who like just saw me like on Rogan a couple times and don't know anything else. But so I'm just saying, like, for us, isn't it amusing that the people in that circle outside who hate my guts really thought that like there are, the point I'm making here, Rob, is that 0% of the audience of this show would even be kind of surprised that I didn't just immediately jump on a kooky theory with no evidence to back it up.
That's so true, and yeah, this did not take courage. It wasn't out of character for Dave to ask in reply to Ian Carroll on Twitter, what evidence do we have that Israel did this? That's all Dave did. That does not take courage. Those people clearly have not listened to Dave and how he lays out arguments based on tangible things and also on conspiracies. He's, well known for saying that it's not whether you're a conspiracy theory or a rational theorist or a rational person, it's whether you're a conspiracy theorist or retarded. So he's willing to entertain conspiracy theories because guess what? The elites conspire against us. They conspire to do nefarious things. The elites conspire to rob us of our liberties. Dave lays all those things out on stories where that's demonstrated, and it can be tied to a tangible narrative with tangible proof and positive evidence leading in that direction. I don't think many of the people just leaping to this conclusion that, there's holes in the narrative, he was starting to ask questions about Israel. They have these unnamed sources, and I'm not taking away from that story. I think it's worth talking about and reporting. That's why I'm doing it. But then just leaping immediately to Israel did this without any shade of doubt. No other possible scenarios are possible. Like, it just doesn't make sense to leap to that length.
Like, when have I ever done that? Roseanne Barr, who I love and will always love forever, goddamn legend. Not the biggest fan of me at the moment. But she tweeted something about it, about the clip. Like, maybe there is some hope for Dave or something like that. And you're like Roseanne, Name one time that I've just jumped on a kooky conspiracy to blame the Jews with zero evidence involved. Name one time. One time that I've put out a theory that I can't argue. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. I'm not, but for the sake of argument, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but I at least have a case to be made. But
I think what this shows is the conflation of Zionists, that even if you question anything related to Israel, you're automatically an anti-Semite. And the second that you don't do that you don't fall into the trap that, some people are making on stupid assertions, well, then there's hope for you. But again, Dave's never latched onto a theory he doesn't believe has credible evidence for it. It just shows kind of the control of Zionists over our government, of the influence they have over our culture, that would be considered courageous for asking for evidence to lay out a theory that, so many people are very sure of at this point.
So anyway, there's no example. No one who listens to this is surprised by me taking this position. There's nothing courageous about it. I'm not losing anyone over like not jumping on this immediately. But anyway, so those guys are all trying to weaponize it as if somehow the fact that I go, hey guys, do we have any evidence of Israeli involvement? And no one can answer me with any goddamn evidence. The fact that proves that you've been right for supporting the fucking destruction of the captive people in Gaza for the last 2 years. Like, no, it really doesn't. So, but like, anyway, I just did.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Very unrelated issues. Dave's been right about all that from the jump, by the way. One of the best critics of Israel from the right. And by the way, he's Jewish. That doesn't stop people from calling him a self-hating Jew. He just wants evidence for assertions made. That is all he wants. And I'm sorry, it's only circumstantial in this case. And it doesn't seem like, so far, the family believes in it. They haven't spoken about it, by the way, believing that happened. And I would like to know more from the family about what they thought about Charlie and his skepticism toward his pro-Israel donors, or skepticism toward Netanyahu and Israel in his last moments. Presumably, they'd be even more close to him than this unnamed source. So I'd love to see what comes out about that. And again, I think it's worth discussing. There are some eyebrow-raising things in what Charlie said, I think, especially on the Megyn Kelly show, about the pressure he was feeling from his donors. That part seems to be corroborated by multiple sources in addition to what was said by this unnamed source to Max Blumenthal. So this is worth covering, for sure. But I don't understand the people that see what's happening here and just say straight up, it has to be Israel no matter what. I've said that a few times, but I think Dave's on the right page here.
I think that was shitty and a just gross attempt to just nakedly politicize what should just be a tragic event. And also in a really dumb way. Like, you're not even making a good point. Specifically, the question was asked about Max Blumenthal, the piece that he wrote in the Gray Zone, and his interview with Tim Dillon. And I say this wholeheartedly by prefacing that I am a fan of Max Blumenthal. I have really enjoyed and learned from much of his work. And the Gray Zone has done phenomenal reporting over the last couple of years.
Yeah, Max Blumenthal is one of the most heroic journalists of our age. That goes without saying. We love him on this channel. I'd love to interview him someday. And yeah, their reporting on Gaza is beyond the best sites in the world. It's among the best sites in covering that, in addition to antiwar.com and a few others. They do a great job.
Particularly, their coverage of Gaza has been excellent and so important and so necessary. But yeah, I thought this article was crazy. I thought it was crazy that they ran it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when I first read it that Blumenthal even like put his name on this thing and published the piece. It was like Judith Miller at the New York Times or something like that. Like, okay, they never came out and said Israel did it, but the whole piece was just like, get you thinking about that. And with nothing, dude. There was, I mean, I don't. Here, let me pull this. Did you read this, by the way, Rob?
I saw that he was on Tim Dillon's show, but I was doing shows yesterday. I didn't get a chance to watch it. But loosely what I've just seen on Twitter is that there's some oddities to the person that they finally arrested, which includes that it doesn't look like he had a gun when he was climbing down. The fact that he...
Yes, let's get into all of that in a second. But just to be clear here, right? So this is in the midst of all of this, the people theorizing that Israel did it. The title of the piece is Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer, was, quote, frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friend reveals. Now, a title like that is, again, this is the type of stuff that we would have called out the New York Times for. Judith Miller never technically said Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. She just like totally left it for you to be the one who, you know, like put those dots together and went like, oh, look, clearly the implication here is that, and then would not publish the things that totally contradicted. But so it's like,
Yeah, actually, I think there's a point here. This article was selective in its choosing of information that made it look like Charlie was frightened of Israel, that he was starting to ask questions about Israel, things like that. It does omit a lot of his pro-Zionist statements during this time frame, by the way, which I've covered in other videos, but among those things is in that same interview with Megyn Kelly where he expresses, a lot of disdain toward the pushback he's getting from donors and from, platforming Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith at his recent Turning Point event. In that same video, he talks about, the fact that in his mind that all the pictures coming out of Gaza, collaborating with Megyn Kelly on this viewpoint in that clip, are Hamas propaganda, and they'd want nothing more than to show that to the world and it being false. On July 29th, he recorded a lengthy video saying that there was no starvation in Gaza. You can see that on his timeline. 12-minute video that was at the time where, the GHF had monopolized the aid in Israel, brought down 400 aid stations to 4. And, Anthony Aguilar, the heroic whistleblower, went on Tucker Carlson and talked about that, how it encouraged stampedes, how live rounds were fired over those people, and that there was starvation happening. That it does omit some of those things, but this is also worthy of coverage. So in a way, I have to disagree with Dave here. This is worthy of coverage that he was frightened about the backlash he got from pro-Israel donors to his organization. He was outspoken about that in several interviews. That part of it seems to be true. I think that's worthy of coverage whether or not you think Israel was culpable in any way in this murder. I think that's worthy journalism. So in that part, I disagree with Dave. I do agree with him. It's very selective. I mean, it adopts a narrative mostly that omits a lot of the pro-Zionist things he was saying, even in the last weeks of his life. That Ben Shapiro interview, I think that's a total nothing burger of him asking Ben softball questions to, knock out of the park with his Zionist apologetics. And that's what he was doing there, too. That was a much shorter interview, and that took place only a few days before his death. I think something like 5 days before his death. That one was very recent.
Yeah, look, did they have and again, I don't want to beat up on Max Blumenthal anymore. I really do admire the guy in many ways. But there's the whole section of the article, okay? The bottom section of the article is titled "The Israel Did It Theory." Okay, that's what it's called, the Israel Did It Theory. And then, where is it? On the second paragraph, the first sentence reads, "There is currently no evidence of an Israeli government role in Kirk's assassination. However, that does not stop thousands of social media people, blah, blah, blah." But like that one sentence means there shouldn't be a section called the Israel Did It Theory. Like you can't have a whole section called like the Israel Did It, just stoking it, and then casually admit in there that you have zero evidence. Look, I mean,
all right, this I think I disagree with too. I think that shows the journalistic integrity of Max to some extent. He's saying in this article, and here's this section Dave is talking about, what people are talking about regarding this theory and its entry into the political zeitgeist and conversation in the United States. He's very clear that he doesn't have evidence of an Israeli government role in Kirk's assassination, but that people are talking about it. That's the story here. So to this extent, I do disagree with Dave. I think some of this information is worthy of putting in here. It's worthy of coverage. It's worthy of considering the fact that people are talking about this. I would like to have more information on this, and especially what his family thinks about it in the future. I don't know if we're going to get that, but I don't think just titling this the Israel Did It Theory and talking about people that are talking about this of prominence, like Ian Carroll, making declarations about it, like Jackson Hinkle, talking about that and including the information that there isn't evidence for it, that's just, healthy journalism. And I'm sorry, printing an article like this will cause some people to think like, oh, this is leading people in the direction of thinking Israel did it and like guiding them in that direction despite everything that's down here. But I don't think that's a fault of the article. That's a fault of how people choose to interpret it. I have no reason to think that Max Blumenthal was just trying to get people to think Israel did it by this article. And he makes that clear right here. He's made that in several interviews, including with Napolitano and Dylan. And I just don't read this the same way Dave does, with the utmost respect of Dave for what he does. He's my friend in real life too. So that being said,
look, what you have here is that one guy said that one guy off the record said, or, one anonymous guy said Charlie Kirk sure was scared of the Israelis. It's like, okay, that's interesting. It's quite possibly true. And it also quite possibly could be completely true, and that in no way implies that Israel did this. It's just, I know people like connecting these dots, but like sometimes they don't connect.
Yeah, Dave's absolutely right there, except for it's more than one unnamed source. Harrison Smith of InfoWars talked to another unnamed source that said several of the similar things, and that source, which is not the same as Max's source, and I assume Harrison Smith, asked his source if he had talked to Max too, and the source said no. That source that Harrison Smith talked to said that Charlie feared that Israel might kill him sometime soon. So again, this is worthy of talking about, whether or not you think there's concrete proof for it or not. And I'm with Dave. I don't think there is. But this is at least more than one unnamed source. And, for it to be dismissed is just as wrong as I think adopting the narrative that this had to be Israel with no positive proof connecting the shooter or a shooter, if you don't believe that's the shooter, with this crime. Again, I've never seen anyone convincingly try to do that yet. I hope that happens if you're so dug into this narrative. Because guess what? At least with Lee Harvey Oswald, we had his connections to the CIA, the surveillance the CIA was doing to him, his connections to the Soviet Union, things like that. With Martin Luther King, his family grew to believe that the FBI was involved. The FBI did warrantlessly surveil King under COINTELPRO. They tried to have him commit suicide. William Sullivan, the deputy director, wrote a letter essentially asking him to do that, saying that's the only choice for you, King. You can read that letter. So you had these connections laid out by people in this narrative. We had nothing like that in this case. And that's what we expect that are skeptical of the Israel did it crowd, even, having the same chagrin toward Israel in terms of our foreign policy. I think that's just the reasonable ask.
It's not the case that because you were in a tense relationship where you may have even felt threatened, that doesn't prove that that's the person who did anything to you. And, I guess one of the things that's weird about this is that I am personally kind of a central figure in this theory. Like I'm, the thing is that Charlie, and this part's definitely true, and we could kind of get into all of this. But the part that's true is that, Charlie Kirk took a lot of heat for having me and Tucker and Megyn Kelly saying the shit she was saying, but he took particularly a lot of heat for hosting me at his last big event. And that he had talked about this on podcast, that a lot of people on the pro-Zionist side were very upset about that. And
it was Tucker Carlson, too, who said not only is it not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, and we should criticize Israel when it's wrong, you got applause for that. He also said, heavily that Epstein was probably working for Israel. So it was Tucker Carlson, too. But yeah, it was this debate between Dave Smith and Josh Hammer, too, in which Dave got more applause than the pro-Zionist stooge Josh Hammer on that show.
He stuck to his guns and defended that, So like that part is true. That dynamic was going on. Now you've got some insiders saying he was legitimately really scared of them. And even some people saying he feared for his life. And like, okay, that is enough of a nugget to go, I sure would love to look into that more. But that's about all you got. Again, that's not exonerating anybody, but to your point, or as you were saying before, from what we have right now, the which is not much, but the evidence that we have points toward this was a radicalized young lefty kid who went out and did this. That's what most of it. Now, if we can get some type of Mossad connection to that family, if we can get some type of here's a new piece of information there, I'm all ears. But to just jump in, and the funny thing
Yeah, there's a lot of eyebrow raising things that Kirk said, but I'm with Dave here. And if you don't believe that's the shooter, by the way, it's your responsibility to tie this to a shooter. If this is the narrative you're going to be pushing, that Israel had to have done this. And there's been lots of politicization about this. People saying that he was a groiper, the left can, manufacturing that narrative. It was a stupid narrative in my mind, just as the right, concocting a narrative that this guy had to be trans before he was even apprehended. And it looks like, his family is cooperating and giving, authorities some information on this. Whether or not or you believe that, a lot of the people close to this guy was saying he lived with a trans partner and was radicalized in leftist ideology. I know people are going to say that. People are going to say, oh, this is just a patsy, Dave. You have to be wrong. Well, then it's your job to connect it to the real shooter if this is your narrative. And connect that shooter to Israel. I just don't see that happening.
Here, Rob, is that like, and I guess in this sense, I get where that person was going, like, oh, it's courageous of me. It's not, because I don't lose anything from doing this. But obviously, on a purely, like, just reading the temperature right now, on a purely business move, it would be, like, I would be incentivized to just jump into this thing as one of the central figures in it and go, yeah, dude, Charlie was telling me too that he was turning on Israel. But this is just not true. It's just not, like, I don't know. And what I was comparing to Altridge, I think Altridge. Anyway, what I was comparing to Judith Miller leaving out that part in the New York Times, that, like, they speculate in the article about, like, oh, Charlie Kirk had said this and he had said that, which is, like, it's true to some degree, but you're leaving out all the other shit he said in that period of time too.
Totally agree with this. My analysis and watching these interviews at length, not just the clips people are disseminating out there to raise eyebrows, and some of those clips do raise eyebrows, but looking at this in totality, his media appearances in the last months, this is not being covered by the people that say Israel did this completely. In fact, some of those same people the day before he shot was calling him, the most pro-Zionist shill on the right. A lot of people did that and then just switched the goalpost to go with this narrative because they want that to be the conclusion, that Israel did this. And in so doing, ignore a lot of the pro-Zionist propaganda he was talking about and he was repeating in the last days of his life. There's that too, even in the interview with Megyn Kelly, certainly in the interview with Ben Shapiro, certainly in that video from July 29th on his timeline.
And I thought there was so many people were, like, really spinning that Ben Shapiro interview. Like, I don't know if you saw that making its rounds on Twitter, Rob, but, like, yeah, dude, when you put dramatic music in and you just play Charlie Kirk's questions, a few of the questions make it sound like, oh, but if you actually go watch the interview and you actually can try your best to take your mind out of how we're viewing the situation now and put yourself into how we were viewing it last week or 2 weeks ago when they did the interview. You can see the whole thing, Rob, right? It was the whole dynamic that was there, which just, to me, this just explains almost all of this, was that Charlie Kirk, unlike all these other guys, right? So Charlie Kirk runs Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is the biggest, like, college campus conservative activist Republican group. So his job is to funnel young people into voting for Republicans, right? Like, that's what Charlie Kirk's in the business of doing. So Charlie Kirk now, he's not Ben Shapiro, and he's not Dave Rubin, and he's not Jordan Peterson. He's not any of those other guys. He's got a different thing that he's got to do. He has to deal with the young right-wingers every day. That's his job. He's got to deal with that 20-year-old right-wing, member of the Republican club at their college activist and keep them on board. Now, activists, for anyone who's been involved in politics at all, especially like talking college campus activists, this is like, you're not going to get paid if you're getting paid at all. You're getting nothing if you're getting paid. You're getting, peanuts. And you're going to work your ass off for this cause. That's what you need to run something like Turning Point USA. What you need is the young activist class. These are your most loyal people because they are truly motivated. Like, these are, Charlie Kirk's got some 20-year-old out there who, like, is, like, to the core of his body, like Jesus Christ is his Lord and Savior, and Jesus Christ blessed the United States of America and its Constitution, and this republic is in trouble, and we need to get these signatures in order to achieve this large. Like, you need people who believe that hard that they'll go collect signatures in the rain or canvass at events or, you know, do all the things that you have to do to be this type of organization. And his young base, he is bleeding right now. Like, he is a guy who supports Israel, and the young people are just, they are abandoning Israel at a rapid rate, like a crazy pace. The support for Israel has evaporated. We talked all about this after I went to that event and did it. And so
yeah, every poll shows this to be true, by the way. The dramatic shift from younger conservatives away from the Israel first doctrine, the Israel first mentality, and support for Israel in general. That is true.
That's the dynamic. Charlie Kirk was caught between a rock and a hard place, and that was his donors and his base. And he had to keep both. In order to do Turning Points USA, you have to have both. You got to have billionaires backing you, and you got to have young activists who are that passionate about doing the work. Otherwise, the whole thing can't happen. And so, to the Ben Shapiro interview, what it clearly is, if you see that, it's not Charlie turning on Israel. It's Charlie going, hey, Ben, I'm talking to the kids, and the kids all say ethnic cleansing. What do you say? And then Ben Shapiro gives you 5 minutes of Hasbro bullshit. And then he goes, now...
This is so true, and I've never seen this point and this angle so persuasively argued. I think that is the dynamic, and I watched that entire interview between Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk. Go watch it. That one's more recent. I think it was only like 7 days ago that video came out on Charlie's show. It's like 25 minutes long. It's worth watching. But that's exactly the dynamic here. And one of the clips people are disseminating from that show is him saying, hey, you know, Ben, you know, one of the things that we've been hearing is that you can't trust the media. Is that true about Israel too? And what we hear from the media about Israel? Teed off to Ben for 4 minutes of Hasbara bullcrap, like Dave Smith said. A little bit more vulgar than me, but that's exactly right. Same thing with this ethnic cleansing argument. How do we answer this ethnic cleansing argument? It was teed off to one of the chief supervillains of Zionism, Ben Shapiro, just run off his propaganda. And Dave's so right about the dynamic Charlie faced, which was unique to American influencers on the right. He had very rich donors that were very pro-Israel, some of which did give him backlash over platforming Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson, but a young activist base, and among that young activist base are people turning against just supporting Israel for, no reason. And, without qualification, like so many of their parents and older generations have been apt and prone to do. That is so true here, and I think that's what you're seeing out of that interview.
When I talk to the kids, they say this, 5 minutes of Hasbro bullshit. There's not one tough follow-up question. There's not. The clear goal of the thing is to steer you back toward supporting Israel. So, just don't lie to me, and don't lie to other people. That's not... is it maybe raise a little bit of an eyebrow that he actually said the words ethnic cleansing, and he actually brought up how can Benjamin Netanyahu say that you're not MAGA if you don't support Israel? Isn't that fucked up? It's okay, yes, maybe it raises an eyebrow, but look, if we're being critical here, that's clearly just explained away by the fact that it's you got to address. He's basically going to Ben Shapiro. You have to give me something to address what they're saying here. He needs an argument back, which he does not have.
Yeah, totally agree. The dynamic in this is similar to what we saw from the trigonometry interview with Netanyahu. A lot of people came out after that interview and said, oh man, I can't believe Konstantin Kisin asked him if he had supported Hamas, because that had been, the word on the street. It was more than the word on the street. It was confirmed by a lot of reporting, both in Israel and the United States. I'm one of them. I kind of felt that initial surprise. But the dynamic here was to tee it off to Netanyahu with prepared responses to deal with that, because it had been something, said over and over, rightly so, by critics of Israel, condemning Netanyahu for, denouncing Iran for supporting Hamas. but the track record is that he's supported Hamas to the tune of $1.8 billion. But when you look at it in this stratum, through this lens, as Dave is, in terms of Charlie Kirk and his interview with Ben Shapiro, no, this was teed up for them to run with their propaganda to kind of draw you back into being pro-Israel and to buy into the bullcrap. I don't think that worked with Netanyahu, but that is what happened in that interview too. I think the situation there is similar.
You know, like, again, I just think it's incumbent on all of us, if we want to know the truth, if we want to be clear-headed thinkers, especially for someone like us, when there's a story that confirms your bias, you got to scrutinize it that much more. You can't, and especially when you're jumping to a wild theory. And even as somebody, I think Netanyahu's the devil and Israel is like the most evil regime. It's just goddamn inexcusable what they've done to the Palestinian people for 60 years. But really for the last 2 is particularly inexcusable. But do I really think that the Mossad shot Charlie Kirk in the neck publicly, executing him? I got a tough time believing that, man. Like, this isn't like his funding dried up and the ADL wrote a hit piece about him or something, you know? Like, this is really, they would do that? I got to say, that's pretty far-fetched, man. And you're going to have a real piece of there to get me thinking that's what happened.
Yeah, me too. That's all I ask is, you know, a concrete narrative linking Israel to the shooting. And, you know, I have no reason personally to doubt that this shooter that they arrested was the shooter. That's not to say I don't think there's holes in the FBI narrative. There is. You know, him changing clothes multiple times and disassembling the rifle and then supposedly reassembling it before discarding it in the forest. There's lots of odd things about this narrative. But if they have DNA from the screwdriver on the roof and things like that Kash Patel talked about yesterday, it's hard for me to doubt the general premise that he took the shot. And if you have evidence otherwise, let me know. But even if you don't think he's the shooter, again, if you're riding this Israel did it narrative, tell me who the shooter was. Tell me their connections to Israel. Give me something, a paper trail, words of association, Netanyahu endorsing this person, Mossad connection with this person. Anything like that, and we just don't see it in this case. So I'm generally with Dave here. I don't ride this train. I think it behooves us to ask questions about this story. I think it's worthy of coverage. I think it's more worthy of coverage than Dave seems to think, by the way, and that Max Blumenthal's article is more worthy of publication and in its wording than Dave thinks. But I can see his point of view there. But at the same time, I'm with Dave on this story. I do interpret these events that people are pointing to explain, you know, Charlie Kirk's turn away from Israel away. I do think he has the right mentality toward that Ben Shapiro interview. He didn't bring up the Megyn Kelly interview. We've talked about that a lot. People bring up the PDB interview where he doubts that October 7th happened the way that we thought it did, that, you know, possibly that it was allowed to happen. That happened only 5 days after October 7th on the PDB podcast in 2023. And then he just spouts off pro-Zionist propaganda for the next 22 months straight, including 2 days later in a tweet where he unapologetically says that Israel has the absolute right to defend itself, you know, the propaganda that they use every single time, and it should kill as many Hamas terrorists as possible. That's in that tweet too. He continued this line for 22 months. So no, a lot of the things people are pointing to are not that compelling. Some of them raise eyebrows. The pressure he was getting from his donors, all this stuff is worthy of talking about, but it doesn't paint a picture that Israel had to have done it. Are there doubts? Yeah. Is the FBI narrative retarded? Yeah. Is it hard to believe in every single way? Yeah, it absolutely is. You know, regarding the rifle and the clothing change and those kind of narratives don't seem to mesh. That's another subject, but that's all unrelated to whether Israel did it. How does it, if the FBI's timeline doesn't match in terms of the clothing change and the rifle and the type of kid this was, you know, fair enough, but how does that make you default to Israel had to have done it? So I'm mostly with Dave here. Great coverage, really great interview. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is Dave Smith right? Are we interpreting Charlie's actions toward the end of his life correctly, let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Dave Smith. Also, please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.